Dumela, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, deal or no deal? It looks like it is no deal. The 30% tariffs that the US imposed on South Africa are expected to kick in tomorrow. With them comes inevitable job losses. So how do we cushion our economy? How does our government cushion the industries likely to be most affected? Trade and Industry Minister Parkster, who joins us tonight. Also on the show, what difference will France, Canada and the UK's moves to recognize a Palestinian state make? The three powerful countries have announced their intention to recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Council in September. But does this bring us any closer to the prospect of a two-state solution? We speak to the Director General at the International Relations Department, Zane Dangor. And then later, should the City of Tshwane lease its City Hall to the Iranian embassy? The embassy has approached the municipality over the possibility of handing over the city to it, which has not been in operation for about a decade. The embassy wants to build the Iranian restaurants, a museum, a library in the hall, which would generate economic opportunity for the city. But the DA says that would be a big mistake. The party's caucus leader in Tshwane, Celia Brink, and the ANC's Aaron Maluleka will speak to us tonight. But first, my comment. So we are witnessing a shift in Western policy regarding the war in the Middle East. France, Canada and the UK have indicated that they plan to recognize a Palestinian state. So first, it was France. And what France has announced is that they will be recognizing, that's the plan, that they'll be recognizing Palestine as a state. And they said they'll do so in September. That was France. That's what they have announced, right? And then came, of course, the other countries that followed. The UK then came next and announced that they will also recognize Palestine in September unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire.
Our goal remains a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state. But right now, that goal is under pressure like never before. I've always said that we will recognize a Palestinian state as a contribution to a proper peace process at the moment of maximum impact for the two-state solution. With that solution now under threat, this is the moment to act. So today, as part of this process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognise the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
Canada is the latest country to join the list.
Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state.
Now, Trump has already targeted Canada for this decision. He says that the trade deal between Canada and the US may be threatened because of this decision by Canada. I mean, these are powerful countries, right? France, the UK, and Canada. They are part of the G7 group, so it matters that they have taken this decision. But what difference is it going to make? What difference will even the awakening of some Republicans to the reality of the situation in Gaza truly make? You know, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Trump ally, are now decrying genocide in Gaza after supporting Israel unconditionally for so long. When South Africa told the world that this is a genocide, it got attacked. When it approached the ICJ, it got attacked, even by some of these Republicans and European countries. Remember, Canada and the UK said the ICJ case was unjustified. They said we were wrong to take Israel to the ICJ. The UK went as far as saying it was nonsense for us to accuse Israel of genocide. And now they're waking up to that reality. So there's a shift in Western policy. But what difference is it going to make? Because Israel, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, continues to do as he pleases with no consequences. There's been public pressure before on Israel, even from its closest ally, the US. There have been United Nations resolutions before against Israel, which have been disregarded, and life has moved on. They're now leading Israeli human rights organizations that are saying to Netanyahu, this is a genocide. These are human rights organizations from Israel. Is he listening to them? Who does Benjamin Netanyahu listen to? And why is he allowed to do as he pleases? So, as significant as this latest development is, I'm taking it with a pinch of salt, because for some reason, there are different rules for Israel. International Relations and Cooperation Minister Ronald Lamola has urged more countries to urgently recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations conference.
Firstly, all states must urgently recognize Palestine's statehood, and the territorial integrity and contiguity of Palestine should be established and respected. In this regard, South Africa welcomes the intention of the recognition of the State of Palestine by France as an important step towards achieving a two-state solution. Secondly, there cannot be peace while the very existence of the Palestinian people is being threatened by Israel's continued genocidal actions in Gaza and the forced displacement of Palestinians in the West Bank. This is part of a systematic pattern of injustice and oppression of Palestinians since the adoption of Resolution 181 and the subsequent Nakba in 1948. These actions must be condemned, and the UN Security Council must act to protect the Palestinian people in whole and in part. Thirdly, preserving the viability of the two-state solution must include promoting safeguards such as the full respect for international law, including international humanitarian law and human rights law. It is necessary for the immediate and full implementation of resolutions of the United Nations and the provisional measures, as well as advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice, to be respected and to be implemented. Not only Israel, but all states must comply with our collective obligations under international law. We all have a duty to preserve the sanctity of international law and ensure accountability.
So the question we're asking you tonight is, does Canada, the UK, and France's decision to recognize a Palestinian state give you any hope of an end to this war in the Middle East? Does this give you hope that we're getting closer to a two-state solution? What do you make of this latest development, and what will it change? You can send us a WhatsApp voice note right now on 078 459 1897. Remember to tell us your name and surname and where you're sending the voice note from, and please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. South Africa has welcomed the intention to recognize a Palestinian state by France, the UK, and Canada. The countries have indicated they plan to officially recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations conference in September. The UK says it will do so unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire in Gaza. But what difference does this make? Does it bring us any closer to the possibility of the end of the war in the Middle East? Zane Dangor is the Director General at the Department of Trade and Industry and joins us now via video link. Mr. Zango, thank you so much for making time. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
I'm sure you don't want this to be the case of I told you so, but as you look at Canada, the UK, France, and some Republicans in the US who are Trump allies, now waking up to the reality of the situation in Gaza, and some are even calling what's happening a genocide, it does become a situation of, we told you so. That's precisely why you went to the ICJ.
Yes, I think as I said yesterday to another forum, saying I told you so is not something that we want to do. You're saying I told you so in the context where the predictions of massive loss of life is coming to fruition is not something that we should be proud of. I think globally we should all be ashamed of it, because we could have stopped it. Through our approach to the ICJ, through our provisional orders that we've asked, we did make the predictions that if Israel is not stopped, then the deaths due to famine and related diseases would begin to match the kinds of deaths that one sees through the military action. And what we're seeing now is that prediction coming to fruition. It could have been stopped. It hasn't been stopped. Israel has been allowed to continue with its impunity. Yeah. We are definitely seeing, and it's undoubted now, that the attempts by Israel to destroy, in part or in whole, the people of Gaza is coming to a point where nobody can deny it. It's genocide. We've just seen, as you've mentioned the states that are coming on board. We've just seen the largest and oldest human rights organization in Israel, B'Tselem, also calling it genocide. So, yeah. And they haven't been able to do that for almost 20 months. So I do think that we're getting to the point where the tide is turning against Israel, and we're hoping that this would be, lead to the kind of impetus where more states take practical action to stop the violence, to ensure that Israel, as instructed by the binding provisional orders, allows aid to enter unhindered, and that they stop the military action, which is genocidal.
Are you hopeful that all of this is going to make a difference? Because we've been here before where there's public pressure that's sort of mounting. We've been here before where even the US grows frustrated about Israel, and yet, as you've said, they've continued to act with impunity, to do as they please with no accountability. So yes, we're seeing France, Canada, the UK moving to recognize a Palestinian state, but and these countries are part of the G7, so that's a big deal. But do you think it'll really make a difference?
Look, some people are skeptical and saying it's not going to make a difference. I believe that even the smallest momentum from the G7 countries does make a difference. The global South countries have expressed themselves quite significantly. The first states to join and intervene in our case were from the global South. We've seen the formation of the Hague Group in January this year, which brought together countries from the global South, committed to not only accountability for Israel, but accountability for all. Because the view there was that, if we don't hold ourselves accountable, you lay the basis for impunity, and you get a world where the big and powerful think that they can do as they please. I do think, though, the difference now is that it's almost that Vietnam War moment or the anti-apartheid moment where the people in countries are holding their governments to account. Yeah. The pressure on countries from bottom-up pressure is significant. I think that you're seeing, it's not just protests, but it's also MPs in the European Parliament, MPs in Spain, and other European capitals raising their voices and saying this is no longer tolerable. Yeah. Our view is that any momentum that can stop this level of carnage, the gravity of it is understated. When we talk about at least 60,000 people killed, that is actually the authorities in Gaza matching the dead bodies to names. Institutions like the Lancet and also a study done by some researchers at Harvard using IDF information estimate that we're looking at close to over 300,000 that will be dead or missing. And once this is counted, when it's all, when the fighting finally stops, we'll see that this kind of carnage would be unparalleled, even in comparison to World War II, if one looks at a percentage of civilian deaths. So the pressure from the horrors that people are seeing is putting a lot of pressure on governments to make different decisions. And we're seeing some of them doing it reluctantly, putting conditionalities on, for example, recognizing a state. But I think that pressure is going to continue.
Yeah, and of course, the UK did say that it will recognize a Palestinian state in September unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire in Gaza. So theirs is a conditional one. There's a call being made, even by Minister Ronald Lamola, that more countries need to join in. But look at Canada. It's already being attacked for taking this position. President Trump says that it will be difficult for the US to make a trade deal with Canada following the announcement that it plans to recognize a Palestinian state. And I wonder what this does to other countries that were probably thinking, let's actually join the list, but they're worried about the consequences thereof.
So I didn't get the whole question because the sound was breaking up, but I get the sense that you're using the example of the threat made against Canada by President Trump. We're in this perverse situation where individuals and countries that are seeking to end a genocide are being subjected to countermeasures and threats. That is an inversion of the rule of international law. You should actually be subjecting those who are committing the genocide and those who are complicit and aiding and abetting and putting countermeasures against them. So what we are seeing is something that history is going to be judging very harshly, is the fact that those who are seeking to stop one of the greatest catastrophes of this generation are being subjected to threats and pressure. And we see that, we saw the threat against Canada. We see what is happening, for example, with this bill in the White House around sanctioning individuals and officials from South Africa. But we also hear this in other capitals, where people are saying, we really want to support you, but we are really afraid of the pressure coming at us. So the pressure is significant. But what is also significant is just the level of horror coming to, this is a genocide that is live screened. It's not a genocide. Many other ICJ cases, for example, the court can take its time because it's a genocide after the court case comes after the fact. What we have here is a genocide in progress, and we've entered into the fray to stop it, because one of the key tenets of the convention isn't just to punish, it's also to prevent it. Yeah. And we think that, we hope that, for example, the formation of the Hague Group, the formation of also the Madrid Group from Spain is going to lead to a momentum where most of the biggest states in the world will then, work with South Africa and others to ensure that this impunity ends. So while these threats will continue, I think that many states will begin to ignore them.
Yeah, I mean, the two-state solution, has been on the table for so long now. Is it ever going to be realized? Because the challenge here is that whatever the United Nations resolves on, Israel doesn't really care. It's disregarded past resolutions of the United Nations. It's frustrated its closest ally, the US, a few times now. It's not listening to the country's leading human rights organizations who are now saying to Benjamin Netanyahu, this is a genocide. So who does Israel listen to?
Look, it's 7 decades of impunity. There's countless of binding UN security resolutions that Israel has ignored. The provisional orders that South Africa asked for and was given are binding. There's not an advisory opinion, they are binding, they've ignored. The challenge is that the Security Council, which is supposed to enforce those provisions, is moribund. You find that the enforceability of the court orders becomes difficult. But this is part of this institutionalized impunity that Israel has enjoyed for 7 decades, which allows them to do what they're doing because, frankly, they do it because they can get away with it. And this is why we are asking for practical measures and accountability from Israel at this stage. For example, when the Hague Group and the Madrid Group, and you're seeing European capitals now saying we must actually ensure that no country supports Israel through provision of arms. These are very important mechanisms, but also the individual criminal liability through the International Criminal Court is also important, because it's only through holding those most responsible accountable for their actions that you end impunity. Now, no state in history has enjoyed as much impunity as Israel has had for the last 7 decades.
Absolutely.
And if we don't stop that, they will continue.
Absolutely. Zane Dangor, Director General at the Department of International Relations, thank you so much for making time for us on Face the Nation this evening. After the break, we'll speak to the Minister of Trade and Industry, Pakistan. Stay with us. Welcome back. Countries around the world, including South Africa, are closely monitoring developments out of the United States ahead of a reciprocal tariff deadline tomorrow. Washington has only announced 8 deals, including with the 27-member European Union bloc, while countries like South Africa, India, Canada, Mexico, and Australia are in the basket of countries that continue to engage with the United States on a new bilateral trade relationship. The Department of Trade and Industry and Competition this week put a detailed statement affirming that it had been engaged in a period of intense negotiations with the United States since April as engagements to refine a final trade framework agreement with Washington continue, with the tariff deadline, of course, just a few hours away. The Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition, Pakistan, joins us now in studio. Minister, thank you for your time. Good evening.
Thank you very much and good evening.
So, we are only a few hours from the 1st of August. That 30% deadline, is it safe to say that that's coming in tomorrow?
It's difficult to say. The reality is that we're one of many countries that have not had formal feedback from the US with regards to what the position would be. We're exchanging notes with various other countries about whether they are receiving feedback, what the direction is, and in many ways we're in the same boat with many other countries. So I certainly can't anticipate that the US would conclude transactions and deals with more than 100 countries overnight. So you really don't know what the announcement would be, except the public announcements that have been made that it would still apply and that countries would have to comply with the 30%. But at this point, we think that it would also be difficult for the US to be able to implement, considering the number of countries that are engaging.
So by the time tomorrow hits, it's the 1st of August, and we haven't heard from the US. How do we move as South Africa?
That's also difficult to say. Part of the issues that we're having to respond to and deal with is if, for example, they make an announcement and say we're imposing a 30% tariff increase on South Africa as from tomorrow. What are the implications for those products that are en route to the US, where orders have been made? And those are some of the more detailed questions that we're engaging them on to say, if you make these decisions, what are the implications? And there are still answers that we need to get from them with regards to how we deal with it. But our view is that we need to continue engaging and work with them until the last second.
Okay, and would the last second be midnight tonight, or we wait until tomorrow? What happens before the end of the day?
We wait until the announcement is made. We engaged with the U.S. Embassy last night. We engaged with the United States trade representative in the U.S. also last night. And they were unable to give us a firm indication as to what it is that we need to do now to get to the point of a decision in relation to South Africa. They suggested that, look, maybe present a revised offer, because we had given an offer. When we're in the US, you'd recall we announced that we've given a framework deal to the US with a set of issues that we thought we should be able to offer them, but also a reciprocal engagement on what we would require from the US side. We haven't had confirmation as to what their stance is so far. The last time they engaged with us, which is formally now 2 weeks ago, was to say, look, we need you to enter into an agreement that allows negotiations to start. We signed on our part. We did not get a signature on the side of the US. And they said, after you get our signatures, the US will also send you a template that you'd be able to fill in or work around to be able to make a submission. And we haven't had confirmation of the template itself, let alone the agreement. So we've said to them, but it's very difficult in this situation to say this is the South African position. So last night they said, look, colleagues, reality is that we're at the end of the road. The first is around the corner. It's not worth waiting for the template anymore. Give us a revised offer. Give us an offer that says this is what you offer in the US. Be explicit about what your additional offers are over and above your original offer, and wait and see.
That's the offer you made this week?
The offer we're making this week, we're actually working on now.
Okay, so this is what they said last night.
This is what they said last night, and we've been working overnight with various departments, with export agencies, export bodies in the country, but also with industry bodies to say, in relation to this component, can we make this off? What's the implication on your industry? Some of them have to do with our sister departments, so we need to engage with departments, and we're busy literally right now working through the details so that, as I said at the last minute, even that's what it takes, we can give a revised offer.
What does that mean for the offer you announced a day ago when you said that we are offering about 60 billion rand in private investment as part of the deal? Is it fair to say that they rejected that deal? That's why they said to you, go make another offer?
No, they haven't given us any feedback.
But how do you make a new offer?
The offer that we've made this week, the announcement we made was to confirm what we initially offered. Remember when
okay,
we
a while back.
A while back.
Yes.
To which we haven't received a response. And now we engaged with them last night, and the last message was, look, revise your offer.
But you haven't given us feedback on the initial offer.
Exactly the issue. But that's the reality of the situation we're dealing with. We're now having to revise the offer, put it there, and as you say, it's a wait and see.
Are you really hopeful, Minister? Because it looks like, this is crunch time for people to really be moving the way that they're moving, where they're not even giving us feedback on the initial offer we've made, but they want us to make a revised offer. Should we not be planning for what seems like is the inevitable here?
We've been planning for different scenarios. We've worked on a response package depending on what the scenario could be. So you have to work on the basis that even if we get the revised offer agreed, you could still get an additional tariff. We've seen it with many other countries, whether it's 10, 15, 21, 30%, even after the deal has been signed. So it doesn't mean that having an offer doesn't come with a tariff increase on your side. So how you plan is what's the worst case scenario? On the worst case scenario, what do we do?
Yeah.
And we've worked comprehensively on what sort of package do we put in place to support industry. But even then, when you say support industry, it is on a firm-by-firm basis. It's industry by industry. There are those industries that would be able to continue to access the U.S. market. A lot of our trade will still continue around minerals that are not levied any tariffs and other engagements with the U.S. Some of the increases some of the industries can absorb. But we're also working on how do we diversify. We've now reached out to sister countries that we have trade relations with to say, can you be able to accommodate certain products? We're establishing an export support center starting from tomorrow where people could be able to come into our offices, onto our website, or call us directly or email us directly. And we'll be able to say, given your circumstances, this is what we could do. These are the issues that impact your industry. These are the possible alternative markets. The other countries are doing the same with us. They are reaching out and saying, look, given the situation, would you be able to accommodate these products? Who are the buyers in your country? So we're literally having to work in that way with many other countries.
Has the U.S. indicated what they would like from us? Because there's been a suggestion about our critical minerals. Donald Trump has always been clear that that's where he wants to play on the African continent. Did that conversation arise during the negotiations?
It is part of the offer that we've made to them. We've said there are a number of areas in which we think we can collaborate and cooperate with the U.S. That would include, for example, we're running out of gas as a country. So we've said, okay, we can purchase LNG from you. You can be a supplier of LNG, amongst others. We said we can partner with you around exploration of gas deposits in our country. We've said we can cooperate and work with you around critical minerals in relation to the areas in which we want to work. Of course, on our side, we want industrialization at the back of those minerals so that we're also able to benefit in that context. So we've made those offers, and those are the things we have not received confirmation on.
How big a factor have domestic issues been in negotiations with them? The DG of the Department of International Relations indicated that domestic issues like BEE were clouding trade talks. Donald Trump has already said that countries that are aligning with BRICS will receive an additional 10%. That's what he had said. Were any of the domestic issues or even our foreign policy a factor in the negotiations?
Well, firstly, I should say that when we engage with our trade colleagues, these are not factors, because we are engaged on the basis of trade issues, trade relations. We've got a history of trade with the US. But when we engage at a political level and a broader discussion, those issues do tend to come up. But our engagements are focused on trade. They're focused on our ability to protect our respective economies, grow our economies, and be able to trade with each other. So I can't ignore the reality that there could be political considerations in the decisions that are made. We've always argued that, and as we went into the US, we had detailed discussions with the US government. Outside what was on TV, we had detailed discussions with the US government around issues that we think, in fact, their interpretation and understanding of issues in the country are not correct. We clarified a lot of those points. We've offered to provide any further information if they require, and we're prepared to engage. We've always said we're ready to engage. We work as a country that's quite transparent on a number of issues.
Is it too late to get our president on a call with the president of the US? Is that even possible at this stage?
Well, it should be possible.
Is it necessary at this stage?
At the point that's the point that the decision would be made by the president.
Because there seems to be a deadlock.
We had a discussion with the president, and he's considering that possibility. Of course, it is on the basis of what the response would be on the other side. But the reality is that it is something that the president has said he would consider. Of course, there are different consultations that he has to undertake before he gets to make that call. So I can't even say at this point after our discussion, is it yesterday, that the president has made the call or not yet.
What is your message to especially industries that are likely to be most affected out there, watching us and wondering, what do we do tomorrow? How do we plan? Do we reach out to the Department of Trade and Industry? I mean, the Citrus Association already came out to raise concerns about our fresh produce. What's your message to industries that are anxious and they're just as confused because there is no finality on the matter? What do they do now when tomorrow hits?
Reach out to us. Reach out to us. We've established an export support desk. We should be able to hold their hands. We're not going to suggest that it's going to be an easy period in which we work, even if you get alternative markets. And there are markets that have said, we're prepared to take your citrus. We don't necessarily have the conditions that others have on your citrus. But getting to the point of a buyer that would enter into a transaction is a bit more detailed work than just making the call.
Yeah.
So that's work that we're going to have to do with them, and we're going to have to hold hands together to find these solutions. We've established a support desk. We're engaging with the countries all over the world with those that have said, in citrus, we've got a possible agreement with you. We can supply. How do we sort that out? But you're dealing with citrus, you're dealing with chemicals, you're dealing with automotive components, with vehicles. So you're dealing with a whole range of industries.
Yeah.
And the impact would be different per industry, but also the opportunities would be different per industry. So let's look at the automotive sector. I mean, it's mainly one company. Of course, the components it's much broader, but it's mainly one company that's affected by exports into the US. Now, when you look for alternative markets, you realize that actually I need to be able to send to a market that's left-hand drive. So you need to target those markets, and you need to have an agreement that works for that particular company, including just customer appetite to buy those vehicles. What is the current stock pile that they have in their country? So you literally have to work through the detail on a daily basis as to what's possible in this market, how do we work here.
Yeah.
So I'm essentially saying to industry, let's work together. Tomorrow would be on site, we'll be engaging with industry, we're talking to different markets, and they also have their own contacts in those respective markets.
And speaking of the markets, have we actually considered the costs of access and the consumer buying power of those alternative markets? Because is it as really as easy as we look for alternative markets and we take our exports there?
No, it's not as easy as that. It's certainly not as easy as that. I mean, I spoke to the EU this morning about, look, we've got agreements about accessing your markets, but there are certain issues that we've had disputes with you about. How do we resolve them as a matter of urgency? Because those issues are about, well, let's use citrus as an example. So they say, but we don't accept your citrus because of citrus black spot in your country. And we say, but you have citrus black spot that you import from other countries. How do we resolve those issues? So these matters have been in dispute. We've raised them at the World Trade Organization, but we're now saying to them, look, we now urgently need to find solutions on all sides. We need to open markets. You require us to open markets for certain of your products, given the current circumstances. So based on the trade agreement that we have with you, can we be able to speed up addressing this issue? Whereas there are markets such as China that have said, well, you can send your citrus into our country, we're more than happy to accept that. Then you have to deal with the buyers on the other side, the logistics of getting the citrus there. So using just citrus as an example, it is at that level of detail where you literally look at a market, at a buyer, at a region, at the logistics of getting there. So it's certainly not going to be easy. It's certainly not easy. But we're going to have to work through this.
Has it been difficult negotiating without an ambassador on the ground in Washington, D.C.?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the trade discussions are happening at a trade level. We engage directly with the U.S. trade representative, which is our counterpart in the U.S. We have a direct line with the U.S. trade representative, so we're not struggling to engage with the U.S. It is about the impediments to the actual discussion that we've had problems with. We've had issues but we've just given you an offer and you haven't been available for a week on the eve of the announcement. How does that work? And that becomes difficult. But in reality, we don't really struggle to make the call and say, can we talk? And they are able to say to us, on this matter, it is only a decision that's going to come from the White House. So you're going to have to wait for.
But they probably don't even know what's going to come from the White House. They probably have to watch social media because that decision will probably be announced there.
And that's part of the risk, because I can imagine when you're in a country and you're dealing with many other countries and all of them require an answer, and you have to give them an answer that creates a degree of certainty but also accepts the limitations in your own environment.
Because you just don't know what the president would say. And
I think all of us are waiting in as much as Americans are also waiting.
Well, Minister, all the best, because we really need this to go somewhat in our favor to avoid, of course, the devastation that would come with this tariff being implemented, looking at some industries that would be affected. So thank you so much for speaking to us and all the best.
Thanks and much appreciated.
We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. The Democratic Alliance is opposed to the possible sale or lease of the Pretoria City Hall to the Iranian embassy. This follows reports that the City of Tshwane received a letter from the embassy expressing interest to acquire the building. The DA's Tshwane leader, Celia Brings, joins us now together with Aaron Maluleka, who is the ANC caucus member. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for making time for us. Celia, let me start with you. First of all, the hall or this building that we're talking about, how long has it been vacant for and why?
So in about 2013, 2014, there were renovations to the City Hall, and it was an irregular undertaking. It was messed up. Significant damage was done to the City Hall, rendering it unsuitable for daily use. And unfortunately, the fact that the city's financial position has been relatively weak has meant that successive administrations could not give money to completing the work. But this is a highly valuable historical building. It's got an organ that is one of the biggest in Southern Africa. It's got great historical value. And indeed, as a city hall, it is a sign of the sovereignty of our country and of our city.
Yeah.
And if renovations, which have to happen, need to take place there, it should certainly not be the city handing it over to a foreign government or donating the space for a cultural center of Iran.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, the argument that has been advanced is that the embassy wants to build Iranian restaurants, they want a museum in there, a library in the hall, which would generate economic opportunity for the city. Where do you stand on this as the ANC?
I could earlier struggle to hear Celia, but I can hear you clearly, Clement. We support the bed building committee. It's a submaral committee appointed by the executive mayor to look at rejuvenation of the CBD space. And it's a project that we believe that it will create economic injection, but also make sure that the CBD of Tshwane works beyond the working hours. And the subcommittee has availed different derelict buildings that needs to be taken over for investment. And we have a different memorandum of understanding with different cities from different embassies. You know that we're hosting 132 embassies here in the capital city. And from time to time, we have roundtable engagements to avail our investment book to these different embassies. And Iranian embassy, like many other, embassies have shown interest either on the buildings or on the land asset that we have. But obviously, MMC Morodi took them on a tour, not necessarily to finalize an agreement on the City Hall, but obviously to say we have land within the precinct of the City Hall that offer derelict buildings. There's a fire station behind the City Hall. There's also land that is also closer to the City Hall that can create opportunities for business investment. Therefore, we are in no position to announce that there's an agreement with the Iranian embassy around the City Hall. But we also have the regulation, Clement, on how we dispose of our assets, and that is going to be overseen by council. And there's a municipal asset transfer regulation that explains the whole entire value chain of disposing of our assets, and we can should change that process.
What do you make, though, Aaron, of the concern by the Democratic Alliance, for instance, that this is going to complicate the relationship that we have with the U.S.? You are very well aware that the U.S. has taken issue with what they think is the close relationship that South Africa has with Iran. Are you not worried as the ANC in Tshwane that this, as the DA says, would complicate that relationship?
We will not become spokespersons of Action SA, but you know, Clement, that as the African National Congress, we have a relationship with Iran. And we are also circumspect of the global politics that are currently at play. And I was listening to you with the Trade and Industry Ministry and also talking global politics and what the US wants. But if we have a political divide, it should not come to play and we should be overshadowed by DA interest in politics. If there are missions that are in Pretoria that want to invest in Pretoria, will not align in terms of what the DA wants, will align in terms of opportunities that we're creating as a capital city, and will not hurt our sovereign relations with any of the countries that are housed here in Pretoria.
All right. Celia, what are you most concerned about? And also, if Tshwane opens up the process and invites people to lease the building and no one comes forward, will you be comfortable with Tshwane handing this, City Hall over to the Iranians?
So, Clement, essentially, if we're looking for a partner to help renovate historical buildings, or whether it be City Hall or any other buildings in the city, let's open up the process. Let's do what you there suggest we do. We put out a request for proposals, or we put out a tender, and we invite a broad spectrum of people to make a contribution. The odds are that if that invite is properly set up, you will get South African businesses, developers, NGOs, other interested parties, including people interested in the preservation of historical buildings, to make a contribution. We are uncomfortable with the City Hall, a symbol of government, of the city, of South African sovereignty, as we've said, being turned into the cultural center of another country. And yes, Clement, we've got to be honest. What are the touch points between South Africa and Iran? We are a constitutional democracy. that values the freedom of the individual, including women. Iran is a theocratic dictatorship. We don't have a significant trading relationship with Iran. The ANC certainly has got a close relationship with Iran. That has complicated our international relations, especially at a very difficult time. You've just had a discussion with the Minister of Trade and Industry, where we've agreed that the United States is aggrieved about South Africa's position for things other than trade, essentially political considerations. Now, you can have your views about that, but, you know, taking the Iranian embassy for a tour of City Hall as a first response to their request for a site for a cultural center at this critical time, probably not the best idea. But I'm quite sure that if we follow an open-ended, proper process, invite different parties, we can retain the City Hall for the people of Tshwane in South Africa without turning it into the cultural center of a foreign government.
Let me ask both of you before we wrap up about what's happening with the city manager. There are some parties in the coalition that are unhappy and they want him out. And that seems to be beginning, of course, to cause some division in the coalition. Let me start with you, Aaron. What's your position as the ANC on the city manager? Because Action SA has been warning of a huge public discontent should the mayor, Nasipi Moya, be removed. Do you foresee similar reaction too? And what's your position on the city manager?
The position of the ANC has always been very clear, and I don't understand why many think our position would then be deemed as a collapse or an attempt to collapse the coalition government. There was a matter that was raised with one deputy city manager. The MEC for Kokta and Gauteng wrote to us that the process to appoint the deputy city manager was incorrect. But when we went back to the MEC for Kokta and Gauteng, Honorable Mama Bolo, we said to him, but it's not only this current deputy city manager that was appointed erroneously. We believe that there are other 6 senior managers that were appointed in the similar panels for both shortlist and appointment. And he came back to us that he will engage further. And we're still waiting for that process to be completed because we believe that if there's an appointment that is of the deputy city manager that is incorrect, and other 6 managers were appointed in the similar manner, therefore it means the 7 of them, the appointments are incorrect. Therefore, we're just still waiting to engage in that process, and Action SA should also be part of the conversation of having a lawful conversation that would not undermine the stability of council, but it should also have no disregard in terms of the laws of appointing senior managers.
And Celia, your position as the Democratic Alliance?
Clement, I am at a bit of a disadvantage where I can't clearly hear what Aaron is saying, but I know what the ANC has stated in public. They had a press conference a few weeks ago in which they said that the party will call for a report to be served in council for the removal of the city manager based on the argument that his appointment back in September 2022, I mean, we're way past the halfway mark of his contract. To make the claim that that appointment was invalid. We don't think that that argument holds any legal ground. The MEC for local government in Gauteng was informed of his appointment back then, provided with the papers, no objections was raised from the side of the MEC. We believe this to be a false pretense to get rid of somebody who's not a politician, who doesn't have political affiliation, and to replace him with a deployed cadre. We're very worried about this. We don't think that this is just going through the motions. We believe this is an attack on the integrity of the city administration. And as you would have seen, Clement, the EFF has also now joined in with those calls.
Celia Brink and Aaron Maluleka, thank you so much to both of you for making time for us. All right, let's wrap up with some of your tweets and WhatsApp voice notes that have come out. We've been asking you whether you think these moves by Canada, the UK, and France to recognize a Palestinian state give you any hope of the end of this war in the Middle East, or even a possibility of a two-state solution. Sidwell says coming together of first world countries against ills committed by another country over The other could silence guns, and in this case, Palestine. But the US must have a buy-in at the pact because it is a superpower that supports Israel. Sunny Boy says, I honestly doubt it will have any impact unless the US supports the call for a two-state solution and recognizes a Palestinian state. We can only wait in hope that it happens. Bono says all the efforts to try and dissolve this war in the Middle East is acceptable. It must come to an end now. And let's also listen to some of the WhatsApp voice notes that have come through.
Hi, Clement. Ruben from Tembisa. On this topic, it gives some sense of hope because for the longest time, Clement, we have seen superpower countries abusing their powers and doing as they please. And it is so sad, man, to see such a crisis, and we as the international community watching without doing anything. At least South Africa has done something, and we are seeing France, UK and Canada following. I think it gives some sense of hope that at least someone is starting now to recognize that what Benjamin Netanyahu has been doing was absolutely wrong. And what is frustrating is that there's absolutely no accountability for them. Thank you.
Sam Alekotriko Pisclemen Dumela. We have been singing this song alone. It is encouraging to hear that some countries are joining the choir. Our music is now audible to some of the great nations. It is now clear that the fight South Africa initiated is winnable. We must also develop the courage and determination to become committed to what we want to see for Palestine. Bye-bye.
All right, this brings us to the end of the Thursday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back with you on Tuesday next week at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.